Our next presenter teaches here in Budapest as Professor of Medicine. His presentation is on antibiotics and AIDS. Please welcome Professor William Nelson.
Thank you. In the Sufi tradition, there's a teacher, and one day the teacher was teaching his students, and he was teaching about the heavenly bodies, and he pointed at the moon. Some of his students looked up and saw the moon, and some of his students looked up and only saw the finger. This is what's happened in science, is that for many, many years we've had reductionism in science, where we've taken the idea of many complex forces and tried to reduce them. In order to build this building, they take the forces of the weight and calculate how much that beam needs to hold. So reductionism as a form of science was valuable in building buildings and building bridges and building cars. Now we know that reductionism fails in complex situations. When I worked on the Apollo project, we put a man into orbit. And this was a two-body problem. The two bodies where we had the Earth as one and the projectiles number two. So this two-body problem was easy to solve with mathematics. When we had three bodies, we had the astronaut leave the spacecraft, all of a sudden the mathematics became very, very complex. The three-body problem was difficult to solve. In the body, in the human body, we have more than just two or three variables. We have thousands, millions, zillions of different variables in our body. Lots of different forces that we have to calculate. It's very, very complex. The drug companies have tried to take this and tried to bring it down to the two-body problem, so that when they analyze something, such as blood pressure, they make a pre-blood pressure measurement, give an intervention, then make a post. So they have two things they're analyzing. They're analyzing the drug and the blood pressure. But the human body is so much more complex than this. This type of reductionism does not work in fractal complex systems. Science now knows this. Science knows that we need to have fractal chaos theory and nonlinear mathematics to solve these issues. Every place in science has reached this conclusion. Any man of learning today knows that fractal mathematics must be used. Nonlinear systems must be used. The one place that has not yielded to this is the drug companies, the medical art, which wants to maintain their reductionistic science in order to sell their different medications. I'm here to talk to you about AIDS and some of the research we've done. And one of the things, the new exciting research about AIDS that came out over the last year, an exciting new development where they found that if they use combinations of drugs, different combinations of drugs, they got superior results. In other words, it was not just a one-body problem. When they started using other drugs, they got a multi-body problem, and they got superior results. So this was exciting, but yet challenging to the mathematics. How do you now get a drug credentialed when multiple items might be usable? Because in the past, all of our legislature and all of our laws on getting a drug credentialed have all been around reductionism. And in a system that is not able to be used to calculate whether a medicine is safe or not. Medicines have been used for years and years, and every year they take 50, 60 medicines off the market because they're killing people. The only way you can get damages for these drugs is to prove that the chemical company previously knew the harm that it could cause before the item was sold. In other words, you have to prove that the drug company knowingly sold you a compound. They knew it was going to hurt, and they still sold it to you. If we could change the law and make them pay if there was any damages, then maybe we'd have a different type of mathematics and a different type of challenge that might be used for this. In our research on antibiotics, I started to see that the antibiotics affected bowel flora. Now, this is the microorganisms in our bowel, in our large intestine. This is such a complex thing. There's over 50 different bacteria, different funguses, different microorganisms existing in our bowel. It's so vastly complex. It's so complex that it cannot be reduced by modern science. And because it's not reducible, it's not studied. But it's bacteria, and now we're taking antibiotics which kill bacteria, upsetting a highly important process in our gut. A process that's important for our vitamins and important for many different factors in our body. A very, very complex situation. Basically, the paper that I've written is how I've shown that the more antibiotics we give the AIDS patients, the quicker they die. The categories of people who get AIDS are the homosexuals and the small children, and these are the two categories that get the most amount of antibiotics. Antibiotics now has fallen and has crashed as an institution. We now know this. Last year, Newsweek had an article, "The End of Antibiotics." The antibiotic generation has failed. The reductionistic science has failed. We need to look at other different factors. We need to look at cofactors. We talk about AIDS, we talk about cofactors. We talk about two things that when each independently doesn't hurt, but when they're together, they might hurt. And this is what we found about the AIDS virus and antibiotics. Separately, they're not so much danger, but when used together, they're deadly. This is what happens to our AIDS patients. This is some of the research we found. Another cofactor is the destruction of the lymphoid tissue, destruction of the adenoids, the tonsils, and the appendix. These are meaningful tissues for the body. These are meaningful defense of viruses, defense of allergies. This is important for us. This is important in our bodies. And when we sacrifice this tissue due to butchery or surgery, whatever you want to call it, what we're doing is weakening the human body, and weakening the body's ability to defend against all viruses, and especially the AIDS virus. This is some of the research we've done. Now, what can we do? What's the solution? I've given you some doom and gloom about antibiotics. A vast, large complex of money that's being out there, developed. The Bible tells us the healing of the nation will come from the leaves of the field. The healing of the nations will come from the leaves of the field. And this is something that I've always believed. And I started to find out that the complexity of nature matches the complexity of the human body, because we're both natural entities. Natural. This is not just a natural fad going around. This is now people starting to realize that natural is a mechanism of healing. The healing of the nations will come from the leaves of the field. Another study that I'd like to share with you is, I've been now in Budapest for a bit, and a friend of mine's often wanted me to study syphilis. He works with rabbits. Inside the syphilis situation, we know that previous to till now, there's been no way to get immunological defense to syphilis. Once you get syphilis, you do not develop immunity to the second exposure. This is a bacterial invasion which is epidemic in the world today. The World Health Organization estimates that there will be 50 million new cases of syphilis next year. 50 million new cases. It's a horrendous disease. This friend asked me for years to do some studies with his rabbits. We worked a homeopathic development. I worked up a drug, homeopathically developed, natural entities. We used it on a bunch of rabbits, and what we found was astounding. Some of the rabbits were injected with a very, very heavy dose of syphilis bacteria, extremely heavy. 1 week later, were given the natural formula, and they had no change versus controls. But in 5 other rabbits that were given the natural formula, and then 1 week later were injected with the syphilis bacteria, these rabbits had developed immunity. And for the first time in medical history, we have an immunological factor to syphilis. Homeopathy, natural medicine, has the answer to some of our questions, has the answer. This is a threat to big money, because now big money has put lots of money into the development of drugs and lots of money into the reductionistic philosophy. This money now is being challenged by the ideas of nonlinear mathematics, fractal theory, and all these other different new developments in medicine.
And now a new consciousness and awareness of natural medicine develops. People everywhere realize how the drug companies buy, twist, and lie to make money. The drug companies put profits above people, and they use it to sell stock. Their time is finished, and all of their money, and all of their power, and all of the king's horses, and all the king's men won't put them back together again. Thank you.